movie 2006 Snakes on the Plane, came out, right? And like that was my like nightmare movie. Like I would never watch it. The preview got to me. All aspects of this. Like I hate flying and I hate snakes. And I understand it's very irrational. I understand, and I want you to know that there is no reason to have like a conversation with me about like how safe flying is, because I know it. You don't need to tell me how good snakes are and the rodents they kill and all that, because I know it. But when you're digging and you're planting a tree in the yard and your son goes, "Dad, snake," and I jump and he goes, "Ha, I got you again," for the 100th time. Like I have this fear of snakes and planes. Like I get it, and I know that it's irrational. I know that it doesn't make sense to anybody. And when I trace it back, like the snake part makes sense to me because as a kid, I was with my cousin, and we're at the greenhouse, which the family greenhouse, and there's lots of water and plants, right? So we'd be playing with his fake snakes. And I remember the day we were throwing these fake snakes around, and I reached down to pick up one of the fake snakes to throw it back at him, and that fake snake wasn't so fake and turned around and hissed at me, and I threw it and screamed and yelled, and it's just not a good look for a grown man. I get it, but as a kid, it still was really embarrassing. But I hated snakes, and I always like that fear. Flying, I don't know where it came from. I have flown, as a kid I flew with my parents. I remember the first time I flew without my parents, I was going over to Africa, and it was always my dream to go to Africa. And we were flying, and the plane was bouncing every which way, and I was calm as everything. And my friend that was on the flight with me said, "Why are you so calm?" I'm like, "Because I know God wants me to go to Africa." And so it was this great time, and I really wasn't too afraid. But I remember the end of the trip as we were getting in the last night in the hotel. I use hotel loosely because when you're in Africa, that's not real hotels. But anyways, we're sitting there and he's like, "Why are you so nervous?" I'm like, "Well, I knew that God brought me safe to Africa because that was my dream. We never talked about anything after that. So, I don't want to get on a plane." Like, and both of these fears handcuff me. Both of these fears are irrational, I know, but they handcuff me. I love walking on trails. I love being in the woods. But this time of year, if you're walking on trails back by the river, there's lots and lots of snakes. And we have a dog that is too stupid to recognize a snake, and he just walks by it. And I'm stuck with this snake at my feet, screaming. And there's one trail in particular in Averill that I really, really love, and it's back through the pines, and it's one of the most beautiful trails for me to walk the dog in. But the last time I went with Max, Max just took off running, and I looked, and there's like 4 snakes, and I'm just kind of like, my walk became a jog that became a sprint, because then more snakes started coming out as they were all going to the river. And I'll be honest, I have not stepped foot in Averill because the next step for me is I'm going to burn the place down, right? Like both of these are irrational fears, but they handcuff things that I enjoy. And I try to tell Jamie, I got to get over my fear of snakes because I love hiking back there. I got to get over my fear of flying because I love going to places and visiting places, but they handcuff me. And as much as I have controlled them and as much as I've worked on those things, they've handcuffed really me enjoying lots of aspects of life. And so maybe there's a fear, or maybe there's something that is holding you back. This sermon series, we're talking about becoming you, leaning into the person that God created you to be, so you could also lean into being more and more Christ-like. So becoming you, becoming who God wants us to be. And there's so many fears, so many things that hold us back from that. And if we're truly honest, yes, I can joke about my fear of flying in snakes, but it's not really like a joke. It's legit, and you can ask anybody that knows me. But there's fears that hold us back. There's fears that we don't feel like we can say to people. There's fears of the unknown. There's fears about things that are coming up. And the truth of the matter is, that's how Satan works. That's how evil works in this world. The thing I want you to understand is that Satan, he comes to steal, kill, and destroy our spirituality, our emotionally, physically, in any way he can. Satan will steal, kill, and destroy us spiritually, emotionally, physically, any way he possibly can. He wants to take the joy that you have and take that away from you. He wants, when you get in and you spend more time with God, Satan is the opposite of that. He's the evil in this world, and he wants to do those things. He wants to make you think you're not good enough. He wants to have you look at those things that you find passionate in this world and knock you down and say, don't do those because you're not good enough. Or he wants to emotionally destroy you. He wants to physically destroy you any possible way he can. And you got to understand, that's when you can grasp that and when you can understand that and you can see those things, right? Like when you're not feeling good about yourself, when you're caught in the middle of a sin, when those things feel so heavy, what is the one thing we do? We isolate ourselves. We pull back from what God would have for us. And it's such a struggle. It's a struggle I have in my own life, in my own sin, my own things, right? Like I battle and I'm like, I can't tell anybody about this. I can't do this because I don't feel like I'm good enough. I walk away from the people that spur me on to be a better Christian and a better follower because I start feeling guilty about it. And Satan will do anything he can to steal that away from you. So if you're in the middle of just today going, John, you don't get it. You don't understand the sin that I'm caught into, the thing I do. Whether it's drinking, whether it's drugs, whether it's pornography, whether it's whatever has caught you so much, whether it's just friendship, gossip, whatever has caught you so much, those are lies from Satan that you're not good enough. Those are lies that he's trying to destroy you. And the truth of the matter is that's what we do is we lean harder into that. We look harder into those things. We turn more to those things that we know we shouldn't because it gives us a temporary fix. The verse today that I'm going to share with you is found in Joel. And it's Joel 2:25 and 26. So you got to understand, first of all, Joel can be found, he's a prophet. And the entire book of Joel is really an entire story of him telling people, turn back to God. God has something amazing for you if you give your life to him. Turn back to God. God has something, he will care for you. He'll be there for you. So in Joel 2:25 and 26, I will repay you for the years the locusts have eaten. The great locust and the young locust and the other locust and the locust swarm. I feel like he's just thrown every part of locust. But you got to understand, right? Like they had just come through this time of the locusts had destroyed their crops. They felt like they couldn't go on. They couldn't do anything more. My great army that I send among you. God's saying he'll be right there for you. He's sending his army. He's being there. He's behind us, right? Like the support. You have to know that God is going to take care of you. You'll have plenty to eat until you are full, and you will praise the name of the Lord, your God, who has worked wonders for you. Never again will my people be shamed. So Joel's telling them, like, you understand, if you turn to God, I will repay this for you. I will take care of this. God is promising he will do that. In the word in there that gets lost, that I want you to look at, is I will repay you for the years the locusts have eaten. This isn't a temporary problem, and this isn't a temporary solution. Do you follow my thought on that? It's years. You may be caught in something, and we have this mentality that we walk through a situation, and we say, oh man, I faced that for a day, and it's just too much, right? Like my wife, Jamie, has went through plantar fasciitis stuff, and she had surgery, and she's getting better, but last night we overdid because, well, she wanted yard work done, and so we did yard work, right? She overdid, and her foot was hurting her, and she's like, I just need you to promise me that I'm not going to be hurting like this the rest of my life. We get caught into that trap, right? Like over and over that we think this feels like it's forever. And God says, no, it's not forever, but I promise you for years I will take care of you. It's not, I want you to understand the solution there. The problem that you're facing is not temporary. It's going to be a problem for years. If you have a problem with drugs, with alcohol, with whatever, it's not like okay, yep, and I just need to be fixed, I'm taken care of. It's going to be a battle for years. If you have an addiction, it's going to be a battle. But God also promises you that he will restore you for years. That this is not a temporary, this is a long term. So to understand that God will restore. So in the middle of whatever you're facing, you need to be be known, let it be known today that if you're in the middle of doubting and if you're in the middle of like, hey, I've tried to battle this, I've really tried to struggle this, fill in the blank of what is so heavy on your heart right now, that you need to know that the second point is God can restore. God can restore your faith. God can restore your love. God can restore your joy. He can restore your peace, your compassion. He can restore your job. He can restore your family. He can restore those finances. And he can restore your emotional stability. And I promise you, walking through life, God can restore those things for you. The battle that you're facing in becoming you and becoming the person, the man or woman that God created you to be, the battle is so heavy. The battle is so difficult. And we turn to so many other things. We turn to those things that we think are going to help us and they don't help us. Or we return to those things that we know don't help us, but they just feel like it's the easy fix at the moment. So in my battle of fear of flying, I'd struggled many times with this battle, and one of the things I tried to do was educate myself with flying. And I would go on, these mission trips. I'd go on these different places. And at one point I said, I'm going to sit by this friend of mine that's on this mission trip that I know is a commercial pilot. Because I feel like if he sat next to me and told me everything that was going on, it would be good. It wasn't. It made the trip miserable, right? And so, he would contact. And so upon one of my trips that I came back from, it was like literally the world's worst trip for John and his fear of flying. We took off from Jamaica, we were in Jamaica in like the middle of nowhere, so we had no idea what was going on in the world. So we took off from Jamaica, and we were a little delayed for some rainstorms, and we got in the air, and the pilot said, da-da-da-da-da, and he's like, we're going to be a little late getting in to Atlanta. Okay? Why, we're kind of right on time. He's like, well, I think I need to let you know that because the way and the path and da-da-da-da-da, we really need to swing out wider because the hurricane that is currently over Florida at the moment. John's fear of flying. What can I do? Did he say hurricane? And people are like, yeah, there's a large hurricane over Florida. And as we're flying, he's like, I just want to let you update. We're going to go a little bit wider out here because the hurricane's a little bigger than we thought. And I'm looking out the window at this large hurricane and going, this is how I die. I die coming home from a mission trip, right? And so we're flying, and we land safe, obviously, because I'm still here today. And I'm like, oh, we made it. And I call my parents, and I'm like, yeah, we made it. Apparently there's a hurricane. Why did nobody let me know this? My mom's like, yeah, you're fine. So we fly from Atlanta to Detroit, no big deal. Then we get in this little plane from Detroit to go to MBS. I swear the guy just got out of serving in our Air Force, because he was weaving like none other and going around every little thing. And I'm like, why are we banking so much? This is supposed to be 25-30 minute flight. And it became more and more and more. So all this to be said, I land and my friend texts me and he's like, how was your trip? And I'm like, it was great, but the flying was horrible. So he calls me, he's like, why was it so bad? I'm like, well, the hurricane. He's like, well, actually flying by a hurricane is one of the safest spots to be. I'm like, no, it's not, shut up. It's not. And I said, but then flying into Detroit, this guy was banking around every cloud, everything. And he looks and goes, well, obviously. And I'm like, what do you mean, obviously? And he's like, the clouds, when you're a pilot, look so beautiful, but it's actually the most dangerous spot to fly. And I said, what? And he goes, we're taught as pilots, you look at a cloud and you're like, oh, you're kind of drawn to it. Just like when you're laying on a beach and you see a cloud, right? You're drawn to it. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, it's not. He goes, one, you have no sight. You have no vision of what is in front of you. You are only trusting your gauges. And I'm like, makes sense. And he goes, and on top of that, flying through there, you don't know if there's lightning in that cloud. You don't know if it's raining in that cloud. You have no idea. Though it's so entrancing, and so we do that. And I thought that's the perfect analogy of what I'm trying to say, right? That's what we're doing. We're so caught in this world that we look at something and we say, well, that's beautiful, and we turn to it when really the damage in there is so, we can't even describe. We don't know the dangers that that we're currently facing. We don't understand those things. And God gives us tools. God gives us an ability to go through those storms, but he also gives us the ability to be smart enough and go, hey, let's dodge these storms. So those 2 points I want you to understand. If you're facing something, you're maybe in that plane and going, hey, this is a storm I need to dodge. This is a storm I need to go around. But you may be also in the middle of a situation where you're like, I can't go around it. There's certain clouds that are just too massive that you have to go through, and you have to, but in those moments of going through that cloud, you got to understand it's going to be rocky. It's going to be turbulent. It's going to shake you to the core. But you need to understand that you got to trust the gauges, just like a pilot. You got to trust the word of God that he's going to get you through. You got to trust the fact that you've made it through other clouds before. And you got to understand that God has something so beautiful in that relationship to walk through that cloud with you. He gives us those tools, those abilities, those understandings. And so if you're in the middle of just a cloud and going, it's shaky, John, life is not really fair, life is not really right now, I need you to understand. You need to be open to God's blessing, however he chooses for you. God has a blessing for your life. God has something to walk through this. We celebrate those things and we don't understand them, right? Like Leo, a couple weeks ago, we prayed for Leo with this understanding. And yes, he got some amazing news, but he still has to have surgery on his arm. Like, it's not cancer. It's nothing that we thought could have been really, really bad. But God has that blessing to walk through it. And I don't understand it. And Leo and I have talked a lot about that since. Like, yes, he still has to have surgery, but it's not cancer. It's nothing horrible. We're walking through it. But for the 3rd year in a row, Leo doesn't get to play football. And that makes no sense to me because he should be able to play football. But why is this going on? Why is he walking through this difficult time? And that's something, right? Like we can go through and as humans and we can see from somebody else. But when you're in the middle of that rain cloud, when you're in the middle of that storm, it's just not a fun place to be. And I want you to understand that we celebrate those moments, not just of when you come out of the rain cloud, because when you've flown through that, right? Like that moment when I land on a plane, like in my head, I'm just like cheering like none other. Because I don't want to be obnoxious and yell and scream. But I'm like, the roller coaster's over. I made it again, right? Like I'm giddy because I made it through that storm. I made it through that situation. And God's there to walk through that situation. And just like Joel promises us in the Bible, he's going to walk through that situation. He's going to walk through that what I call small h hell with you. And he's on the other side and he's promising you that he's going to take care of you and he's going to watch over you. So this week in this entire series, we've been going through celebrating people at One Church. And this week, I'm going to celebrate Heidi. So Heidi needs to come up here because she hates that I'm doing this. But as she comes up here, we're celebrating Heidi because Heidi has done so many things. And you may know Heidi as the one that she cleans up and picks up, and when your kids spill goldfish all over the church, she vacuums them up for us. And she does so many amazing things. But a couple weeks ago, I got a chance to celebrate Heidi as she didn't know I was going to be there. Her brother invited me to be part of a program in Midland County called the Drug Court Program, and Heidi graduated from the Drug Court Program. And I got a chance to celebrate, and I told myself I was going to, I wasn't going to say anything, and then they said, does anybody want to say anything? So I decided to share, and nobody here is going to be surprised that I cried and got super emotional, sharing what Heidi, and how far she's come. We got a chance to watch Heidi, if it's fair to say, walk in this church the first time at the old building because it was mandatory. Was that a fair way to say that? Had to sign some paperwork, had to sign some stuff to say, yep, she checked the boxes, she went to church. And I watched Heidi transform from somebody that walked in our church because she had to do it as part of the program to somebody that we celebrate, got baptized, has committed her life to God, made new, so many things, and watched as she stepped up so many different ways. And we're gonna celebrate Heidi today and her graduation from the Drug Court Program and part of that, but just, I guess, share, if you don't mind, just share a little bit. I know we've talked back and forth and where God's leading your heart, but just share a little bit of what this looks like and why you hate that I'm celebrating you today.
I really hate being on the spot.
And that's why I'm pulling you to the middle so everybody can.
Yeah, it's not my favorite place to be. So a little bit about John's sermon today. First of all, yes, I grew up very close to my family. Life was great, whatever, typical kid. Became a teenager, started to try drugs. Experimented a little bit more and a little bit more. I'm 49, by the way, so I started this at 18, long time ago. And it'll be 9 years now. The last 7 years before, so let me say, I'm 2 years sober. So when I say 7 years, it's 7 years from before I got sober. So for 7 years, my addiction was very bad. My family cut me off. The lies, all the things about Satan, I believed them all. I wasn't good enough. I was never going to be good enough. I believed all of those. So I made myself feel better with drugs. Losing my family, I've lost jobs, I've bought 4 homes and lost them. Lots of things. I got in trouble, asked for help. I asked for drug court. And yes, walking into church was mandatory. I needed a signature so that I didn't get in trouble for drug court. That lasted for, I would say, a couple months. A couple months of, oh gosh, we have to do this again. And then after a couple months, it became a want to go. So I was calling my brother, so let me finish that part of the story. Getting sober, I got my family back. So when it says like God's going to return all of those things, he does. Because now financially I am good, my family is good, all of those things. Flying through those clouds, when you get sober, when you go from that lifestyle to this lifestyle, it's the biggest cloud you ever face in your life, and it is the scariest cloud that you ever face. But it was the best cloud I've ever faced and flown through. And now that I'm 2 years sober, I can look back and say the roller coaster's over, my journey, yeah.
And I want to reiterate, part of, and we touched base and we talked about this, your family stepped away from you in the middle of that cloud. And I want you to understand this is not a judgment. It was, you have fully said it's what they should have done, because it was not a good spot to be. You were so far that they had to step away and say it's not safe to be around. It's not, and that was, I know, broke your heart, but also I think it's beautiful to see the relationship you now have with your niece and nephew and with your brother, and just that God has restored so much of that. And I know that God continues to restore. So we talk about a bunch of different stuff. Talk to me a little bit about what you're excited about, what God has restored and what God is going to continue. Because this journey's not over, right? Like the restoration process, all of this stuff, it's not like, okay, check, everything's done, we're back to normal, and this is like, we talk about, like you've shared with me on Saturdays, like pray for this situation because it needs help. Like, can you talk a little on that restoration, or?
Well, obviously, when you're in addiction, you don't care about your community or anybody around you. So since I've gotten sober, I want to help my community, and I want to be better. Because God has helped me so much, I want to share that with other people. So I do a lot of different things. People give me things all the time. So furniture, clothing, necessities, I distribute them throughout our community to people in need who need them, who can use them, who will appreciate them. A family, or maybe it's not even a family because I don't have, I'm single, but somebody who's moving into their first place and they don't have a bed, or they don't have a table, or they don't have something. people reach out, they're like, hey, so-and-so needs a bed. Let me check that, and I'll give them a bed. I also started college, April? I think I started in April. I started college. I would like to be an addiction counselor. I would like to help people who were where I was at, to help them be where I am at now, because being here is much better than being there. Also, I want to start helping, because we need to be aware of drugs. We live in Midland. Midland is a nice town. I'm not saying it's not, but Midland is a nice town, but I was an addict who lived in Midland. So we are here. We are in your backyards. We are your neighbors. We go to school with your kids. We are in your lives, in your grocery shopping, all around you. So I want to bring awareness to our community about the drug situation, how bad it really is, what's going on, and how can we as a community deal with this? Not fight it, but deal with it, because addicts are going to be addicts until they choose to quit. We can't make them quit. We can't force them to quit. But we can support them, we can be there, and we can be understanding. And as a church, I've been to churches in my past, and I did not feel accepted, welcomed, or part of. One thing, when you are in recovery, I am a those person. That person, those people. I'm a those people. I'm okay with being a those people now. But one church did make me feel accepted. It made me feel a part of something. And at that point in time in my life, 2 months after starting one church, I needed to feel a part of something, because at that point in time I didn't feel like I was a part of anything, and especially not mainstream society, because I am one of those people.
Thank you for sharing, and I love it. And we obviously, I'm personally, and we as a church are beyond proud. That program that Judge Beal does in Midland County is phenomenal. I've known Judge Beal for years, and I've seen people work harder for a little Kit Kat bar than they would for anything else, because he has a program that does some amazing stuff. And so we celebrate that. But just like last week with Carrie, and if you weren't here, and we're going to do with Heidi right now, we as a church, we celebrate you. So let's give Heidi a round of applause, graduating. And I thank you so much for sharing your story. I thank you. And there's people out here that you guys, I know as a pastor, I know as a friend, I've watched a lot of you overcome some difficult situations. And Heidi's became more public because of her addiction, and also the recovery became more. And I love that she's leaned into sharing that with people. And I want you guys to know that when we as a church share the things we've conquered, when we as a church share the successes, is with our friends, with our families, and we come out of that and we say, you know what, is little or big, we celebrate those things. And that's why we're going to continue to celebrate. When we celebrate those moments of, when Jamie and I on our last vacation landed, and I looked at her and I said, we made it. Like, I conquered my fear one more time to get on a plane. Like, we celebrate those things. That's what spurs us on. So I want you to celebrate those as a church, to celebrate those wins, and to also be aware that by you sharing your story and Heidi sharing your story is where God is seen in the middle of that. So let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for today. Thank you for Heidi's ability to come forward. We thank you for all of her hard work. And God, we lift up to you people that are hurting and lost, whether it be with a drug addiction, alcohol addiction, any addiction, or just are so caught up they don't see a way out, God. I just pray that you will provide a way out by using us. The way out is through you, God. The way out is us recognizing the evil, the sin, and God, the way out is by turning to you. May we demonstrate and show people. May we lovingly walk with people out of their addictions, out of their problems. And God, sometimes lovingly walking away is or walking somebody through it is walking away, and that's difficult. It's hard to step back, just like Heidi's family did. It's hard to step back when you see somebody you love hurting so much, but God, we ask that you give us the patience and your timing, the perfect way to help that person, to walk through the situation. God, when those storms of life come, the clouds seem so scary. God, that you're there for us. God, we just ask this all in your powerful name. Amen.